Hey, this is Tina again. I've got another story I want to read for you, and this one's called The Tomato Patch Puzzle. It was a bright and sunny summer day, and Perilla and her brother Josh were helping their Aunt Carrie pick ripe tomatoes for canning. They picked the biggest and reddest tomatoes they could find. One by one, they filled the bushel basket with the fruits. These tomatoes will make good sauce for pizza, won't they, Auntie? Asked Perilla. Yes, they will, answered Aunt Carrie. We will preserve them today so that in the winter months, when the snow is on the ground, we will have ripe fresh tomatoes to use on pizza or make into spaghetti sauce or into soup or chili. Yum, said little brother Josh. I really like bisgetti. Especially your bisgetti, Auntie. Why, thank you, Josh, answered Aunt Carrie. I do make a pretty good spaghetti sauce, don't I? Auntie, you know very well that you win the blue ribbon at the fair every year for your tomato sauce, quipped Perilla. Remember, children, to take the stem off the tomato before you put it in the basket. That way the stems won't poke holes in the other tomatoes in the basket, Aunt Carrie told them. The two children carefully picked the tomatoes one by one, pulled off the short green stem, and threw it on the ground. Then they placed the perfect tomatoes in the bushel basket. They were warm from the hot sun, and a faint tomato smell rose up from the basket. Ooh, nice. Look at this one, said Josh. It's the biggest one yet. The tomato he held was bigger than his two hands together could hold. This one is yellow instead of red, said Perilla, and that one is almost purple. Who ever heard of a purple tomato? Those are special tomatoes called heritage tomatoes. The seeds for these tomatoes have been saved year after year for sometimes 100 years, explained Aunt Carrie. I have tomatoes from all over the world in this garden. Here are some plum tomatoes from Italy, and here are big German tomatoes, and round Polish tomatoes, and tiny tomatoes from South America. These tomatoes were really special. Aunt Carrie showed the children a tomato with green stripes throughout the skin. It's striped, Auntie. It kind of looks like a zebra, said Josh. Yes, and I got the seeds for these tomatoes from a man who lives in Slovenia. I got his name from a gardening magazine, and we traded seeds this year. He sent me his family tomato seeds, and I sent him my prize-winning sunflower seeds, explained Aunt Carrie. He told me that the seeds for this tomato have been in his family for 100 years. That's really cool, Auntie, said Perilla. Have you written to him since you got the seeds? Yes, I took the pictures of the seeds sprouting in my light garden and then again in the cold frame when they were bigger. And he sent me pictures of his family standing in the garden with all of his tomatoes. He has 2 grandsons and 2 granddaughters. All of the tomatoes in the garden were held upright by a wooden stake pounded into the ground and strips of cloth tying the tomato stem to the stake. Why are the tomatoes staked up, Auntie? Asked Perilla. That is so the tomatoes won't lay on the ground. If the tomatoes are on the ground, they might rot or get stepped on by people or deer or the dog, and it's easier for animals like woodchucks and skunks to eat them if they're on the ground, said Aunt Carrie. So you mean animals eat tomatoes too? Asked Josh. Sure, it's an easy meal for them, said Aunt Carrie. And while I am willing to share some of my harvest with the animals, I would like to have lots of nice tomatoes for canning. Look at this tomato, Auntie. Josh held out a tomato with a large V-shaped chunk taken out of the bottom. It looks like something has been eating this tomato. Yes, it does. What part of the tomato did it come from, Josh? Was it the top or the middle or the bottom? Asked Auntie. It was down here on the very bottom of the plant, answered Josh. I have been picking all the tomatoes on the bottom because I can't reach the top. Do you know what's been eating the tomatoes down here on the bottom, Auntie? I think I know, replied Aunt Carrie. It's a very short animal, one that can only reach the bottom tomatoes. Let's see if we can find any more tomatoes with this unusual V-slice eaten away. Perilla and Josh and Aunt Carrie looked at all the tomato plants and found quite a few tomatoes with the V-shaped bites out of the bottom of the tomato. Let's keep looking and see if we can find the animal. Remember, it's a very short animal, and it looks as if it takes only one bite out of each tomato, said Aunt Carrie. The tomato patch had about 50 tomato plants staked up, 5 rows of 10 each. So Perilla and Josh and Aunt Carrie looked up and down each row, lifting up the bottom leaves of each plant to see if they could find the animal that was eating the tomatoes on the bottom. They were almost through the 3rd row when Perilla exclaimed, "Oh, I think I have found the animal. Look, look." Josh rushed over to Perilla to see what was under the tomato plant. Aunt Carrie stepped through the rows of tomatoes to look also. There, under a large tomato plant, hidden by giant leaves, was a box turtle. Its head was slowly reaching out of its shell, and its mouth opened slowly, and the turtle took a V-shaped bite out of the red tomato on the bottom of the plant. "Well, for goodness sake," said Aunt Carrie. "Can you see why the bite is always V-shaped?" "Yes," said Perilla. The mouth of the turtle is V-shaped, sort of like a bird's beak." "Do you think turtles like Buzgetti?" asked Josh. Aunt Carrie laughed and ruffled Josh's hair. "Only you would think of something like that. No, I don't think turtles like spaghetti, and I wouldn't feed it to them. They like plain old tomatoes right off the vine." "I do too," said Josh, and he picked a tomato off the plant and bit right into it. It squirted all over him, and all over Perilla, and all over the turtle. "Yum," he said. For the rest of the afternoon, Perilla and Josh helped Aunt Carrie can the tomatoes. Auntie peeled the tomatoes and cut them up, and Perilla put them in clean jars. Josh put the lids on and screwed them down tight. Then the jars went into the large blue canner that had been sitting on the stove all day getting hot. It was filled with steaming water. After the tomatoes cooked in the jars in the canner, the jars were set on the kitchen table until they cooled down. Perilla and Josh looked at the tomatoes in the jars, read and cooked and preserved for the winter. "I have an idea," said Aunt Carrie. "Let's have Uncle William take a picture of us with the canned tomatoes, and I will send it to Yuri in Slovenia, and then we can write him a letter and tell him about the turtle." "Auntie," started Josh, "I want to draw Yuri a picture of the turtle. Can I get the art supplies out?" "Oh, Josh, that's a great idea," said Aunt Carrie. "Of course you can." So Josh colored a picture of the turtle eating the tomato, and Perilla drew a picture of a big jar of tomatoes. "Do you think they have turtles in Slovenia, Auntie?" asked Perilla. "I don't know, dear," she answered, "but I do know they have lots and lots of tomatoes." That's the end of that one.